9 hikers cut open their tent and ran into a blizzard. None of them made it through the night. This is the true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident, one of history's most haunting unsolved mysteries. It is January 23, 1959. 10 young students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute gather at a train station in Sverdlovsk in the Soviet Union. Their leader is 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, experienced, methodical, and deeply respected by his peers. The group's goal, a Category 3 trek, the highest difficulty rating in Soviet hiking, through the northern Ural Mountains in the dead of winter. Among the 9 who complete the journey are Zinaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Rustem Slobodin, and Yuri Doroshenko, all seasoned hikers in their 20s. One member, Semyon Zolotaryov, is the oldest at 38, a decorated World War II veteran. He joined the group last minute, replacing another hiker. They are well equipped: tents, sleeping bags, food for 2 weeks, skis, and ice axes. Every person on this expedition has done this before. On February 1st, they pitched their tent on the slope of a remote mountain called Kolatyakal. In the local Mansi language, the name translates to Dead Mountain. Investigators would later note, there was no logical reason to camp there. A tree line with natural windbreak stood just 1 mile below. Dyatlov chose the exposed slope anyway. Sometime in the early hours of February 2nd, something happened. Something that made 9 experienced hikers do the most irrational thing imaginable. They cut open the tent from the inside, not unzipped, cut from within. Then they ran out into minus 30 degrees Celsius with no shoes and no jackets. The thermometer read minus 30. They had no fire. They left behind food, coats, boots, everything they needed to survive. When they didn't arrive at their destination on schedule, no one was immediately alarmed. Expeditions ran late. Weather delayed groups. It happened. But by February 20th, nearly 3 weeks after the group went silent, family members began pressing authorities. A search party was dispatched. On February 26th, a search team spotted the tent from the air. It was half buried in snow and visibly damaged. When they reached it on foot, it was empty. What happened next stopped the search party cold. They found footprints in the snow, 9 sets, leading directly away from the tent, down the slope, toward the tree line. The prints were not panicked. They were not running. Investigators noted that the steps were measured, almost calm, as if the group walked willingly into the darkness. The first 2 bodies were found near a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonyshenko. Both were shoeless. Both were in their underwear. Investigators found that branches on the cedar, up to 5 meters high, had been freshly broken. Someone had climbed the tree in the dark with bare hands in minus 30 degrees. 3 more bodies were found on the slope between the tent and the tree: Igor Dyatlov, Rustem Slobodin, and Zinaida Kolmogorova. All were facing back toward the tent, as if they had turned around to return. Rustem Slobodin had a small fracture in his skull. The medical examiner ruled it insufficient to cause death. He had frozen to death, but someone or something had struck him in the head. The remaining 4 hikers were not found for another 2 months. In early May, when the snow finally melted, searchers discovered them buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine. And this is where the case crosses from tragedy into something else entirely. What the medical examiners found on these 4 bodies made hardened Soviet investigators go quiet. Nicolas Thibault Brignolel had a catastrophic skull fracture. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov each had multiple broken ribs, not cracked, broken, on both sides of their bodies simultaneously. The forensic examiner noted, the force required to produce these injuries was equivalent to a car crash at high speed. Yet there were no external wounds, no bruising, no broken skin. Then came Lyudmila Dubinina. Her eyes were missing. Her tongue, soft palate, and part of her throat had been removed. The medical examiner was unable to explain how. Investigators initially speculated the tissue may have decomposed or been removed by animals. But the injuries bore no signs of animal activity. The cuts were clean. Then the clothing was tested. Several garments from the group came back positive for radioactive contamination, specifically beta radiation. at levels described as unusually high. Two members of the group, Krivonyshenko and Zolotaryov, had worked near nuclear facilities. This was 1959 Soviet Russia. Some theorized contaminated work clothes, but not everyone was affected. Witnesses in the region, local Mansi people and residents of nearby villages, reported seeing glowing orange spheres moving silently in the sky over the Ural Mountains that night. Soviet military units stationed in the area were also reported to have witnessed the same lights. What those lights were has never been officially confirmed. The Soviet government conducted a formal investigation. In May of 1959, the case was officially closed. The final conclusion used a phrase that has haunted researchers ever since. The cause of death was recorded as an unknown compelling force. That was the entire explanation, an unknown compelling force. The case files were classified and locked away. Families were denied access. Investigators were instructed to say nothing. For over 30 years, the full records were sealed. 65 years later, the theories have multiplied, and none of them fully account for every piece of evidence. One theory, an avalanche. The slope angle and snow conditions that night may have produced a sudden slab collapse. A wall of snow striking the tent with crushing force. This could explain the internal injuries. But critics of the avalanche theory point out there was no avalanche debris found at the scene. The tent was damaged but still standing, and none of the footprints in the snow were disturbed. Another theory, infrasound. Certain wind patterns over mountain ridges can generate low-frequency sound waves below human hearing. These infrasound waves can cause sudden, overwhelming panic, hallucinations, irrational terror. Researchers have documented infrasound-related panic in other settings. The measured calm of the footprints, then the desperate tree climbing, could indicate a sudden onset and equally sudden dissipation. A third theory involves a Soviet military weapons test. The region was near active Cold War testing zones. Some researchers believe a secret rocket or pressure weapon test went wrong and struck the campsite. This theory would explain the radioactive contamination, the internal injuries without external wounds, and the government's subsequent silence and file classification. But no direct evidence of a test in that location has ever surfaced. In 2019, 60 years after the deaths, Russian prosecutors reopened the investigation. They examined the evidence using modern forensic methods. Their conclusion, an avalanche. The global research community was largely unconvinced. The avalanche theory still fails to explain the missing tongue, the radioactivity, the calm footprints, and the witnesses reporting lights in the sky. What makes the Dyatlov Pass incident impossible to dismiss is this. Every piece of evidence points in a slightly different direction. Not one theory can hold all of them. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old. He was 2 months from graduation. Zinaida Kolmogorova was 22. She was found with her face turned toward the tent, as if she almost made it back. They were 9 people who left home on an adventure, people who loved mountains the way some people love the sea. They deserved answers. 65 years later, we still owe them. If you found this story as haunting as I do, there's a full deep dive into each of the 9 hikers' final diary entries linked in the description. Their last words are something else entirely. Subscribe if this is the kind of story that keeps you up at night, because there are more, far more.